it's been quite the high scoring Stanley Cup Final, but Game 5 in Edmonton went the Panthers' way in a low event game, and now they find themselves one win away from their second consecutive cup.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Sunday, June 15th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X at Monoman12. That is Frank Forte, former host and producer for the Florida Panthers TV network, joining me on today's edition of the show. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. So the Florida Panthers defeat the Edmonton Oilers by final score of 5-2 in Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Final. A one-day break in between Games 4 and 5 after the Panthers collapsed, and the Panthers played a controlled game and really took control of it after with 11 minutes left. With Brad Marchand scoring, got to play their game and really was well in control of this one. And Frank, wow, what a hockey game. And to think that the Panthers were giving up quite a few of those rush chances to Edmonton in the beginning, and then once Brad Marchand scored, it was all Panthers from there.
Yeah, it really was, again, a good first period for the Panthers after those first couple of minutes, to be able to go up 2-0 and then not have happened what happened in Game 4 in the second period. And again, a couple early penalties, which we all know, referees, game management, blah, 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 is going to happen. A couple early power plays, fortunately, were killed off, although I did think that blunted the Panthers' pace of play, because when you're killing penalties, you're generally defending on your heels, and it's hard to sort of regenerate that energy and that skating and the attacking mindset. So I thought it bogged down a little bit in the second period because of that. But, big goal by Marchand in the third, and then Edmonton scores, and I'm sure, some of us were thinking, oh, please, not again. But the immediate response by Barkov, who made an unbelievable play again behind the net. And I know he's been taking some criticism this series because, he has 3 points. They're all assists. And I think some of that is fair. But I think the little things he does along the boards, winning the puck battles, stripping the defenseman of that puck and setting up Rhino for that immediate response. And I think we all breathed a sigh of relief after that. So I tweeted out not that long ago, it wasn't a perfect road game, but it was darn close. And what an effort. And they have to have that same effort and commitment, if not more so, in Game 6 to close this thing out.
Yeah, and for me, thinking about this for the Panthers here, just the fact of the penalty kill creating so much momentum for the Panthers. I mean, the first penalty that they went to the box for on the Seth Jones interference, I mean, they did not give up a single shot attempt for the Edmonton Oilers, and they were able to just close out the period. And also Sam Bennett scoring later on in just a minute after with the strip of the puck in the neutral zone, and then on that shot block, and then Bennett converting now 13 goals on the road for Sam Bennett in the first period. Also, they won 2/3 of the faceoff, so they were able to get it clean. The Marchand goal was after faceoff. They were also able to just exit their zone very, very cleanly as well. Also, the Panthers were just attempting a lot of those backdoor plays. There was one from to Luce Ryan that didn't connect to the tape, one from Barkov to Sam Reinhart. So we were seeing how in sync the Panthers really were from really the midway point of the first period on. And I mean, going back to the penalty kill, I mean, Bob made the stops when he needed to. There was one from Ryder Hopkins just above the circle, and then Corey Perry right on the doorstep. And then there was one where McDavid on the third one for the Edmonton Oilers right off the post after a few of those chances. I mean, Forsling had a great slide to disrupt the centering feed as well. So there were so many great things that the Panthers were doing. And also the TNT broadcast mentioned this as well, that how the Panthers were gaining the zone, they were sitting back a little bit instead of challenging them right at the blue line. And that's really what was how the Panthers were able to just continue to get the load of time in the offensive zone.
Yeah, and I think the Panthers did a great job with their sticks tonight. There was a lot of deflected passes, a lot of pucks poked off Oiler sticks, right at the blue line or shortly, into the zone. I just thought they played a really, really good defensive game. You mentioned it was more of a low event game than any of the previous four, and that's certainly true. I think, when it's 2-2, both teams are playing a little bit cautiously, trying to not make that big mistake. But I thought the Panthers played, if for a Stanley Cup Final, as close to a perfect road game as you can get. And I don't think there were any passengers tonight. I mentioned this on X the other day. Gadjevich and Greer and Nosek have been pretty good since they, were inserted as the new fourth line during the playoffs. But the other night, Greer and Gadjo were on the ice less than 7 minutes and were on for 2 goals against. That can't happen. As fourth liners, maybe you're not expected to score, but you can't give up goals, especially when you're on the ice that little. And I thought they were really solid tonight in, what limited minutes they played. So everybody was on board tonight. Everybody, I know this is cliche, everybody pulled on the rope. And, you mentioned Forsling. I thought he had a couple of great defensive plays until he screened Bob on the last goal with no Oilers standing right to him. But, that's nitpicky. It's a 6-on-5 goal. So I just thought they played a fantastic road game. And, you mentioned Seth Jones, and we all know what Brad Marchand has done. And I've publicly said this. I don't think the Panthers would be in this position if Bill Zito hadn't acquired those two guys. I believe that. I mean, I knew the Panthers were a good team. They had a really good regular season, not a great regular season. I honestly didn't expect them to be back in the final because it's just so hard to do 3 years in a row. And they played so much hockey. But, those two acquisitions, I think in a lot of ways re-energized this team. And I mean, I really honestly don't think they'd be in this position without those two acquisitions. So if Bill Zito doesn't win GM of the Year this year, it's never going to happen.
No doubt. And I mean, Matthew Tkachuk even said it last week about how the new guys have re-energized the group. I mean, even though Nate Schmidt didn't get involved offensively points wise, he's also been a big factor. I mean, starting off with a bang in the Tampa series, even then.
Yeah. I mean, think about that pickup. He gets bought out by Winnipeg. The Panthers get him for $800,000. And, he's for a third pair guy. I think he's been really good, and especially in the playoffs. So again, another great pickup there. He's made very few mistakes in his time as Panthers general manager, and that's why they're in this position.
No doubt. And just to think about how the Panthers have been, I mean, I'm looking back at the shot charts for this 21-18 after you had so many games where Bob was like facing 40 one night and then in the 30s the other night. And I mean, to think that law of averages go to a certain point sometimes when it comes to the Florida Panthers and just their style of play, and the fact that that Sergei Bobrovsky wasn't under siege. 21 shots for the Oilers, 19 was for the Panthers, but the fact that he wasn't under siege really helped the Panthers really get to their game. And I mean, especially with how they were able to just handle the stretch passes of the Edmonton Oilers and just the neutral zone play. I mean, like I said at the beginning, outside of those chances by Connor Brown and Connor McDavid, which Ekblad made an outstanding defensive play, and Bob was already down, that could have been a disaster from the start. And to think that it could have been from disaster to controlling play. Yeah,
and look at it this way too. You're not going to limit Edmonton to no high danger chances. They're just too good offensively, right? We all know that. But the Panthers don't worry about Bob. They have ultimate faith in Bob. And contrast that with what the Oilers are going through right now with their goaltending. I mean, Can they come back and win 2 games with their offensive talent? Yeah, sure, it's possible. But for a team in the Stanley Cup Final to be saying, well, who's going to start game 4? Who's going to start game 5? Who do we go back to in game 6? That's not good.
Yeah.
That's not good, right? The Panthers aren't going through any of that. So, I mean, I think even Gretzky mentioned that on the post-game show. So, that's not a good position for a head coach and a team to be in, where you're saying, well, do we have faith in this guy, that guy, neither of them, both of them? I don't know. And that's a problem.
And another problem is the fact that they once again changed up the forward lines, taking out Kapanen. Evander Kane's now on the 4th line. Troy Stetcher, after the previous game, he was after that goal from Anton Lundell and the forecheck from Verhaeghe. He was he didn't play. He didn't play much after that. I mean, I'm looking at the time on ice for the Oilers' defense. It was more spread out today, but Stetcher still like a 14-minute difference between him and Evan Bouchard on the night.
Yeah.
So that the management is a little strange from
I mean, at this point, Edmonton's they have no choice. They have to ride their top guys.
No doubt.
They have no choice at this point. And Kane, who for me has zero credibility when he says anything. He's just taken so many bad penalties. Like, dude, keep your stick at the waist level or below. It's not that simple. It's that simple, right? You carry your stick up around the chest. There was the one where he got Marchand the other night. And some people say, oh, well, Marchand lifted his stick into his face. Well, Edmonton fans were saying that, and I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But, yeah, when you put your stick up in a guy's chest or near his Adam's apple, you're putting yourself in a position where that can happen, and the referees can call it. So, you know what, dude? It's pretty simple. Keep your stick waist level or below. It's not, it's not rocket science. But they're going to ride. They're going to have to ride their top guys if they have any shot. And if the Panthers do as good a job in Game 6 as they did tonight against, especially Draisaitl, then this thing could be over in 6.
Yeah, and very, very, very well so. And hey, the Panthers have been able to just roll the 4 lines, while you've seen that sometimes that the Oilers have had to go to that Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl line, which now it looks, now the thing with Nugent Hopkins' injury is it hurts the other line as well. What's going on there? So advantage Panthers there. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2, where we are going to discuss our 3 stars of the game and the moment where we knew the game was won. We'll discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. And ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONHL for 50% off of your first year. Segment 2 here on this Sunday, June 15th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. Armando Velez here with Frank Forte, former television host and producer for the Florida Panthers TV network, here on the show to break down this 5-2 win for the Panthers over the Edmonton Oilers in Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Final. And so 3 stars of the game. Number 3 star, I'm going to go with Gustav Forsling. The amount of defensive plays, the amount of great the minutes that he's consistently assigned, and for him to be match up with the McDavid line and still to limit them. Although, yes, you mentioned the screen on Sergei Bobrovsky earlier, but still I thought he had an outstanding game. Number 2 star, Alexander Barkov. The fact that the Panthers were first on the rim around, got the puck deep, got in on their forecheck, and then the backhand opportunity to Sam Reinhart. Yes, there's still those questions. Does Alexander Barkov need to get involved offensively? So far through 5 games, the Panthers have been leading for 200 minutes, while the Oilers have been leading for 33. That's a Sportsnet stat, and Barkov doing it with the four assists there. And number 1 star for me, Brad Marchand. The 2 goals, which 7 of his 10 goals have been go-ahead goals. He's one of 2 players. The other one is Mario Lemieux, to score 5 goals in 2 different Stanley Cup Finals. And he's the first player to score 6 goals in the Stanley Cup Final since former Panther Esa Tikkanen in the 1988 Stanley Cup Finals for the Edmonton Oilers against the Boston Bruins. Although Tikkanen only played 28 games for the Panthers, still, that's a great historical context for the Panthers there. So, Frank, your 3 stars for the Panthers here.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in agreement with you, Armando. I thought Forsling was really, really solid tonight. Made a couple of really important defensive plays when the game was still in doubt. I mentioned Barkov, and I know some fans have been on him about not scoring goals in this series, but I think he's been really strong in his board play. He's won, I think it's 40 more faceoffs coming into tonight than anybody else in these Stanley Cup playoffs.
Wow.
And, yeah, he's up over 60% for the playoffs as a whole. And the play he made when it was 3-1, it's reminiscent of the play in the final game against Carolina in terms of clutch at that time. I would say, Reinhart, Bennett, I thought both were really good. And Marchand, who did not, for my money, play well in Game 4, even though he had 5 shots on goal. What else can you say about this guy? 2 world-class goals tonight. And, it's funny. I still, when I'm watching him, there's a part of my brain that can't wrap itself around the fact that Marchand is in a Panthers jersey after, all those years as a rival. It's still almost just a little part of my brain says this is not real. This is a dream. It's surreal. But thank goodness, because, man, has he been good in these playoffs. Like I said, I don't think he played great in Game 4, but the veteran that he is, he came right back. And that 3rd goal, man, you saw Tkachuk on the bench. I was watching with some friends, and all Tkachuk said over and over was, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God." And somebody said, "That's it." And I said, you know what? That's all that needs to be said after that goal. That sums it up. So he was the first star. And man, how seamlessly has he fit in with this group? It's just amazing. And it speaks at some level to the hockey culture of guys can be bitter rivals and not like each other at all when they're on different teams. But man, once he walks through the door of your locker room, and as long as his personality fits with the team culture, which it clearly does, it's like, the Nate Schmidt said it, Marchand went after him a couple times in a game this year, and he said, it's all been hashed out. No big deal. I think Bennett and Marshy playing together at the Four Nations, they sort of gained a different respect for each other. And in hockey, a lot, most of the time, bygones are bygones. When we're wearing the same colors, man, I got your back and you got mine.
Yeah. And that leads perfectly to the moment where we knew the game was won, and the second Marchand goal, just swimming around Jake Wallman, backhand, forehand, back to his forehand, through the 5-hole of Calvin Pickard, and basically making it 3-0 at the time. And honestly, Frank, I'll say this: I saw 3-0 this time. I said the Panthers are not going to do it. ... Again. So.
Yeah, although when McDavid scored, there was that little hint of doubt that crept into my mind. I was 90% sure it was over when Marchand made it 3-0. But when Reinhart scored right after, within a minute of McDavid, I said, okay, we got this one. We're coming back home with a 3-2 lead.
Yeah. So I get it. I get why when you see it so many times, a 3-0 series lead for last year, the 3-1 in game 1, the 3-0 in game 4. I mean, it's so crazy. Like I mentioned earlier, the stat from the 200 minutes to the 33 minutes. To think that the fact that we still see 2-2 going into game 5 right before the Panthers were and you think, and you look at the other wins, game 3 and game 5, the Panthers have been able to just to put the pressure on and just tire them out, like you mentioned about the options that Chris Knobloch has or lack thereof right now, and the fact that they're in a scramble. The Panthers are just there doing their thing. They obviously they didn't get on the ice between games 4 and 5. They don't have the excuse of both teams have the whole 1-day travel, so it's not you can't use the whole excuse on one because the other team also had it.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe the Panthers can petition the league to wear their whites at home because 10 road wins is tied for the most ever with, I think, the 2019 Blues is what I read. I mean, they've been so good on the road these playoffs. They've been better on the road than at home. So maybe they can petition the league to wear white on Tuesday. I say that jokingly, but it's. I got to tell you, this for me is all gravy. I just didn't expect the Panthers to be back in the final this year. So, did I think they're, one of the better teams in the league? Sure. But to do this 3 years in a row, to be in a final, and yes, we got 60 more minutes, hopefully, of hard work to get it done. It's never over till it's over, to quote Yogi Berra, right? But for them to be in this position again, and let's remember, that first time against Vegas, they didn't have much of a chance. They were so banged up going into that series. And then when Tkachuk gets the broken sternum, that pretty much sealed it right there. So I didn't really think they had much of a shot against Vegas. But to be in this position 2 years in a row in position to win it, man, that's something special. And I mean, I hope we all enjoy it because this is rare air, man. It really is. So take nothing for granted, and we shouldn't, given all the years of struggle. We shouldn't take it for granted. But I just want to reinforce that point because this is very, very rare air.
No doubt. And let's continue the conversation on the other side of the break, where now the Panthers will be traveling back to South Florida, 2 days off, and now we'll have a chance to win at home in Game 6 of the Stanley Cup Final on Tuesday night. We'll discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Segment 3 here on this Sunday, June 15th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. Here with Frank Forte, former host and producer of the Florida Panthers TV network from the days of Fox Sports Florida. And Frank, it's a little past midnight here on the East Coast, but 32 years ago on June 14th was when the Panthers revealed their uniforms. That iconic photo of Wayne Huizenga dropping the puck.
I was there.
Yeah. So to think that the Florida Panthers went from that to 3 years in the three straight years in the final, and you mentioned the 10 straight road win, not the 10 straight road wins, the 10 total road wins. I mean, the 2019 Blues did it, the 2018 Washington Capitals, seventh team to do so, and 5 of the previous 6 won the Stanley Cup. So, and like I said, just a lot of credit to the Panthers. They and the thing is, throughout this whole playoff run, they've won every single Game 5. A lot of the Game 5s that they've been, they haven't. We just lost Frank there, but I'll continue talking. A lot of the Game 5s, we have seen the Panthers just manhandle their opposition. I mean, handling the Tampa Bay Lightning easily in Game 5, going down 2-0 against the Carolina Hurricanes on the road in in the Eastern Conference Final, doing it again twice against the Toronto Maple Leafs in Game 5 and Game 7. So, as we are now getting Frank Forte back here, I was just mentioning the Panthers. No worries. I was just mentioning about how the Panthers have been dominant in Game 5 against Toronto. Toronto twice in 5 and 7, Tampa Bay to close it out, and then Carolina. So the fact is that the series could take quite a turn, and they've had a 2-2 tie in a series and a 3-1 lead both in Game 5s, and every single one the Panthers have just put their foot down on the throat. Crazy to think.
It is, and I think it speaks to what Paul Maurice has built in terms of the buy-in and the structure, and just doing all the things that you need to do to win, and getting everybody to be on board with that. Because again, this is what they're doing is not easy. You go back to when Edmonton had Gretzky and Curry and all the Grant Fuhr and all those guys. It was a different league back then. So what they're doing now in the cap era, where you're going to lose pieces off a championship team, as they did after last season, nothing seems to phase this team. They can come out and play a bad game, or they blow that 3-0 lead the other night, and the next day they were all like, "Hey, okay, on to the next game. Go back to doing what we need to do to win. Learn from your mistakes." I know everybody says, "Oh, they say that, it's cliche," but every cliche has truth in it, right? So, nothing seems to really bother them in terms of how they perform from game to game. So, I think that speaks to the professionalism that's evident on this team, the player leadership, the coaching staff, and really from the owner on down. So, again, I'm sitting here just kind of amazed that they're in this position again.
I'm kind of at the point where I don't. It's hard for me to get really too stressed about Panther games now, because of how I guess that's at the point where we've been a little spoiled here.
Yeah.
With how they've been able to just bounce back. I mean, only 1-2 game losing streak all throughout the playoffs, and that was games 1 and 2 of the Leafs series.
Right.
And funny enough, both of them were one of the 3 road games that they've only lost in this entire playoff run. The last time I felt really nervous about a game was Game 7 of last year, right before.
Yeah.
I had a good feeling about Game 7 against Toronto. I even had a good feeling about this one, just because of situationally. If the people listening to the show want to go back to my recent show, it's on the record for the confidence level. But
I guess the thing is, nothing surprises me about this team, really.
Yeah.
You say, you go back to that, and blowing a 3-0 lead isn't good, but you got to give some credit to Edmonton, because they're a talented team. When you have that kind of top end offensive talent, that kind of stuff can happen. It doesn't make it good from our standpoint, but you're at least willing. I was at least willing to cut them some slack on that, and they come back and score the last minute goal. But again, I've gotten to the point where nothing really surprises me. You come to expect that they put stuff behind them when it's bad, and when things are going good, they don't get too cocky about it. It's just put your head down and go back and grind. Do the things you need to be successful.
Even Sam Bennett spoke about it after the game. It's like they've already moved on to Game 6 there, and that's what you have to have, that mentality. You just have to. So
you have to have the attention span of a goldfish. Right? And just, you can't do anything about the past. You can't change anything, good or bad. And, people talk about momentum in the series, and I just don't think there has been any in this series from game to game. Maybe from period to period there has been, but not from game to game. So you just got to go back to square one and come out and play the same way you played tonight, whether it's at home or on the road. Little things win games like this. The details of how you play, how you manage the puck, how you battle along the boards, winning those type of battles, whether you're boxing a guy out in front of the net on defense or getting in position to screen the other goalie or whatever, little things like that. Yeah, we saw the highlight reel goal for Marchand tonight, but the way he skated tonight and the way he hunted pucks and the way he's dragged Luosterainen and Lundell along with him to play with that little bit extra energy, I think has been a wonderful thing to see.
Mm-hmm. One more thing about Marchand. He was asked after the game what 2011 Marchand would think about 2025 Brad Marchand. He said, "Oh, that guy looks good."
Yeah, I mean, I almost feel like we're living in an alternate universe with Brad Marchand as a Panther, and not only just him as a Panther, but playing as well as he's played in these playoffs. I mean, wow. And we all kind of thought that he was going to play with Chucky and Bennett when he got here, but putting him with Lundy and Luosterainen has been, I mean, I don't think I'm going too far by saying genius, because that line has worked, and there's been no third line on any other team that the Panthers have played in the playoffs that have come close to matching those guys.
Even Gretzky in the postgame was talking about how valuable his third lines were in his playing days. So that's another thing of just up and down. You have to have that for a championship team if you want to be able to not only lift Lord Stanley's Cup a first time, but a second time. I mean, Tampa Bay, the Yanni Gourds of the world, the Mark Gaudreaus, the Andre Palats when they were together. So that's that.
It definitely takes everybody, because I said to a friend I was watching with tonight, this is the hardest championship to win, in my view. Just the physical and mental demands of the game of hockey, and to win 16 games, going through those type of rigors, it's the hardest thing and you can't depend on just 2 or 3 guys to do it. It's got to be everybody. And you mentioned a guy like Nate Schmidt, what a great start he got off to in the Tampa series. He got off to a good start in this series in terms of assists. Different nights, it's got to be different people. I think Luosterainen's been really good in these playoffs.
Oh, yeah. With
the little things, the empty net goal was the cherry on the cake tonight. But just like that play the other night where I think it was game 3 where, he gets the puck out of the zone and the guys are closing on him, and he sees that Marchand or Bennett has the speed going, just nudges the puck ahead of him and just keeps the defender on his back. I mean, that's a little thing, but it turns out to be a big play.
Yeah. Just the buy-in is just outstanding. And one more to do it. And they have a chance at home. No. They haven't clinched a single game.
The fourth one is always the hardest. Another cliche. The fourth one is always the hardest to get. I know I've been clichéing you to death tonight. I apologize to that. But like I said, they all have a kernel of truth in them, at least. And, closing out a team is hard. That's why it's one of the hardest trophy. It is the hardest trophy to win. So, again, they got to go back and do what they did tonight. They got to play the same way. And if you can limit, because you're not going to limit Edmonton's, you're not going to eliminate Edmonton's quality chances, but you got to limit them. And, hopefully Bob comes up with the key stop at the key time. And that's the other thing you talk about, goals or saves. It's not just how they happen, it's when they happen.
No doubt.
And like I said, when it's 3-1, all of a sudden, and people are going, maybe you're grabbing the stick a little tighter, and then Barkov makes that play and Reinhart scores less than a minute later, you're like, okay, we're good.
Yeah. So, thank goodness. And Game 6, Tuesday night.
Yep.
Can't wait. So, Frank, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Panthers are now 1 win away from clinching their second straight Stanley Cup Final. Tell everybody where they can follow you online.
Oh, I will. But by the way, you mentioned Marchand back in 2011. If you'd have said that to Panther fans back in 2011, 3 straight Cup Finals, chance to win 2 in a row, who would have believed it, right?
Yeah.
So, you can find me we're our television show on FanDuel Sportsnet Florida is on hiatus until mid-August when we crank it up for football season. And you can always find me on www.fausports.com, Florida Atlantic University. Starting my 10th football season there. So time has flown. So, but was a reporter covering the Panthers from their inception, 11 years as part of the broadcast team, and the last 10, not so much involvement, but still a huge fan. And might have to find a place for, this has been great. I mean, it's just been unbelievable. So I'm happy to be living through it.
Absolutely. And thank you, as always, for joining me on the show. So see you again very soon, my friend.
All right. Thanks, Armando.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL Network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone and Steel Rodent, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Frank Forte, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're your team every day.